is one of the basic metapsychiatry that questions that existential theism is presenting about God and man and nature of life are questions that we are pursuing. It seems, though, that wherever I turn in any reading about existentialism, that it's not in vogue at all. Everybody seems to be cutting it down and holding out no hope. Seems that it was a philosophical movement in this country in the 50s, but has been well passed over, and everybody's interested in behaviorism or some other philosophical approach.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could comment on that and maybe say something about the meaning of this, as far as it's being generally disregarded as something passe.
Well, we are not exactly talking about existential theism. We're talking about theistic existentialism. What is the difference? If we were talking about existential theism, we would be dealing with theology. If we talk about theistic existentialism, we are talking about existentialism which takes into consideration the existence of God. So it isn't theology that is our primary concern, but theistic existentialism. Now your question is really a why question. Why is there so little in the literature about theistic existentialism? Or what could be the meaning of this, correct?
Yes.
Well, there are more theistic existentialists in the world among philosophers than meets the eye. You see, existentialism is a widely misunderstood philosophical orientation, fantastically distorted and misunderstood and even maligned. All sorts of sins are being attributed to existentialism. But, the world is largely very disillusioned with God. The various religions have discredited God to a great extent. Therefore, any philosopher who would want to be accepted or listened to would either have to present existentialism as a humanistic philosophy or an atheistic philosophy or a crypto-theistic philosophy. What is a crypto-theistic philosophy? Where the issue of God is hidden, so that it's never mentioned openly. One of the most outstanding crypto-theistic philosophers is Heidegger. Heidegger was a former Catholic priest. And then he became a philosopher, a brilliant philosopher. And what he did is he hid God in obscure language. Any one of you who tried to read Heidegger must have found him most obscure, even in German. Those of you who can read German, his books are fantastically difficult to read because he has a special kind of language. He never publicly admitted it, but I suspect that the whole linguistic obscurantism had one purpose: to disguise the fact that he was God-oriented. Once an interviewer confronted him with this question and asked him, "What is your position in relation to God?" And in his usual obscure fashion, he said, "As for God, I am waiting for him to reveal himself." Now, interestingly enough, everywhere in the world, there's a great embarrassment about admitting that we are interested in God. There is one philosopher who has been portrayed about his attitude towards God, and his name was Gabriel Marcel. Have you ever heard of Gabriel Marcel? He was a French Catholic philosopher. He didn't hide God between the lines of his writing. Now, as for Sartre, you know, he is openly and aggressively atheistic. And with Camus, is always also touch and go. But as far as psychiatry is concerned, God is totally absent. And it is not becoming for a scientist to mention God, because God is not subject to scientific experimentation. So in medicine and psychiatry, we hear very little about God. As for the United States, our culture is highly pragmatic and humanistic, in spite of the fact that our founding fathers were basically religious, God-fearing people. But our culture ignores God. We relegate God to a formal ceremony on Sundays and holidays. God has not entered into everyday living. Now, in theistic existentialism, which we call metapsychiatry, meta meaning going beyond present-day psychiatry, we study the relevancy of God consciousness to mental health and to healing processes involving all aspects of life. So, What we are doing here is endeavoring to put soul into psychiatry and breathe life into the valley of dry bones. And indeed, experience has proven that this way of seeking to understand man and his problems is extremely helpful. You see, a great deal of research has gone into the study of man. Man has been studied as a cadaver, as a machine, as a physiological organism, as a biochemical laboratory. Lately, man is being studied as a molecular structure. All sorts of research approaches, sophisticated and very impressive research approaches have been devised to the study of man. And we know more and more about less and less, as far as man is concerned. Do you know the definition of a specialist? You know it? Would you like to know it? A specialist is someone who is learning more and more about less and less, till finally he knows everything about nothing. The scientific study of man over the years, literature has proven itself quite unsatisfactory. And frustrating. And with all the miracles of modern medicine, we still live in fear and dread of disease, decrepitude, and complications of treatment. The fact is that we don't understand man. Now that is a mystery. You see, we understand atomic physics, we understand astronomy, we understand mathematics, we understand all sorts of things, but man remains a mystery. Now the explanation is simple. It is impossible to understand man by studying man. There is no such thing as man. It's like if you would want to study a maple tree by dissecting a leaf and subjecting it to chemical and electronic and molecular and atomic and analysis. By studying a leaf, you cannot understand the tree. And by studying man, it is not possible to understand man. We can only find out more and more about details of man. But man doesn't exist out of context. Therefore, if we want to understand man, we must study God. Because God is the context in which man exists. There is no such thing as man apart from God. What happens to a leaf if you separate it from the tree? It ceases to be a leaf. The moment you separate a leaf from the tree, it's not a leaf anymore, it is trash. A leaf can only be understood in the context of the tree. Which is the life-giving source of the tree. And man can only be understood in the context of God. The creative power, the intelligence which sustains man. Therefore, theistic existentialism studies man as a manifestation of divine existence. In order to understand anything about anything in life, we must study it in its proper context. Otherwise, we are dealing with an artifact. And our conclusions and discoveries and data will be incomplete. Now, what psychiatry has done is it has gone even further. Psychiatry didn't even bother to study man apart from God in a state of health. Psychiatry was studying the sicknesses of man. It's like saying you pick up a leaf from the tree and then study the diseases on the leaf and expect to understand the tree from the diseases. So what we have, the study of psychopathology, a human pathology in general, totally out of context. So theistic existentialism proposes to study the life of man in the context of its life-giving source. And our primary interest is to come to understand healthy man. We are interested to know under what conditions man can be healthy. So we are not asking what's wrong with man, but what constitutes healthy man. It stands to reason, if we shall understand the conditions under which a healthy man can be found, this knowledge might prove itself to be extremely practical. In benefiting those in need. And this is what existential metapsychiatry is all about. It is the study of the conditions of man in his proper context. Now the question is, in a humanistic and pragmatic culture as ours is, will this idea be acceptable? Absolutely not. We are interested in how to handle life. We're not interested in what life is. We are interested in managerial skills. We want to know what to do. How to operate. It's like when we buy a car, we're not interested in the theories of internal combustion physics. All we want to know is how to drive it. You see, but with man it is more disastrous. Now, humanism is a little better than operationalism, because humanism said man must be humanized. It is not enough to know how to handle man. We also must discover certain values, human values which will make man more amenable to the socializing process, so that man could live in communities with a relative tolerable amount of frictions. So humanism endeavors to humanize man to improve community life. But still, while the operationalist dehumanizes man and turns him into an object of manipulation, the humanist moralizes man and equally disregards the context, the divine context, the creative foundation of human existence.
Dr. Berlin, this is the American Family Council.
How do you do?
Dr. Mozart.
Maybe there is a chair someplace. So, where were we?
Humanist.
Yes. Yes.
Disregard the divine context,
Right.
the creative
Right.
foundation.
It is not enough to be human. It is not enough to humanize man. Because humanism still does not recognize the existential context of man. The idea is I can become a decent person through my own efforts. And I can get along with my fellow men just by wanting to. Recently, one of our friends said, I don't know what's the matter with me. I'm trying to be generous, and every morning in the office I make the coffee, and everybody comes to drink the coffee in the office, but I have a feeling that people are just taking advantage of my generosity. The harder I try to be good and generous, the less people are appreciating it, and they're just taking advantage of me, and nobody gives a damn. You see, he had a humanistic approach to generosity. His idea of generosity was to be nice to people in the hope that they will be nice to him and appreciate his helpfulness. But instead of that, he found that this kind of human generosity doesn't really work. People just take advantage of it and consider him a fool. Or they see through its ulterior motive, namely, the humanistic generosity is just a public relations ploy. In ancient China, there was a sage called Zhuangzi, and he said, when the wrong man does the right thing, then the right thing works the wrong way. Did you get that? This humanistic generosity creates the wrong man who is doing the right thing, but it works the wrong way. Therefore, social ethics is not enough. It just isn't going to work, and it doesn't. it is not enough to be a nice guy. It doesn't work. Now the same Zhuangzi related his saying, but I'm putting it this way. But when the right man happens to do the wrong thing, even the wrong thing will work the right way. Isn't that interesting? Now the question is, what is the right man? Wouldn't that be wonderful for us all to become the right man? And then we could do no wrong. And everything would work, as the Bible says, together for good. Now, when it comes to generosity, what's the difference between the wrong man and the right man? Who can explain it?
Is the wrong man is trying to impress others, but the right man is trying to express the goodness of God.
That's very beautiful. That's wonderful. But still you're describing it in behavioristic terms. What does the wrong man do and what does the right man do? It's correct, looking at it from a motivational behavioristic standpoint. But essentially, the difference is in perspective. You see, the right man has an entirely different viewpoint on life and on himself than the wrong man.
It's doing it as an expression of who he is.
That's right. Did everybody understand it? The right man acts from a different source of awareness than the wrong man. The wrong man's perspective on life is interpersonal, horizontal, self and other. What is the right man's perspective on life? God, right, wonderful. You see, the right man's perspective, the right man sees himself as an expression of divine love intelligence. And his generosity is qualitatively, radically different. Here in a nutshell, you can see the principle of existential metapsychiatry, which endeavors to help man to become aware of himself as an expression and manifestation of an existentially valid context in which he lives and moves and acts and has his being. Therefore, our work consists of helping people to become the right man under all circumstances. A right man cannot help but be a beneficial presence in the world, which is not synonymous with a do-gooder. You see, a do-gooder is the wrong man trying to do good. A right man is not a do-gooder. What is he? He's a be-gooder. So we're not learning how to do good. We are learning how to be the good which we already are. Because if man is the image and likeness of God, a manifestation of divine love intelligence, he cannot help but be good. And his presence in the world is a blessing. Without even trying. So, theistic existentialism can be fully appreciated if you can see it in juxtaposition to pragmatism, operationalism, humanism, personalism, intellectualism, and all the other isms. In juxtaposition to all these isms, you can come to really appreciate theistic existentialism. The primary aim of which is for us to become the right man